You know, fear, it's this super primal emotion. It can literally save our lives, but it can also hold us back from so much. But what if it just wasn't there? Today, we are diving deep into the incredible science behind what it actually means to live a life with absolutely no fear.
No, really. Just imagine that for a second. No sweaty palms before a huge presentation. No racing heart when you're walking down a dark street. You wouldn't even get that adrenaline rush on a roller coaster. What would that life even be like?
Well, for a British man named Geordie Cernick, this isn't just some thought experiment. It's his reality. He had a medical procedure to get rid of his adrenal glands, which make most of our adrenaline, to help with his anxiety. And, well, the treatment worked. Maybe a little too well. To test it, he went skydiving, he zip-wired off bridges, he even rappelled down a skyscraper, and he felt nothing. Zero thrill, zero fear. His pulse didn't even quicken.
But Geordie's story, which is really about the chemicals in our body, that's just scratching the surface. To really get to the bottom of fear, we have to go deeper, right into the brain itself. And that brings us to the story of a woman known to science only as SM. Her case is where the mystery really begins.
For decades, scientists tried pretty much everything you can think of to scare SM. They had her watch the scariest movies they could find, The Shining, Silence of the Lambs. Her reaction? Nothing. They took her to a famously haunted old sanatorium. Still nothing. They even brought in live snakes and spiders, things that make most of us jump out of our skin. And the result? Complete calm. No fear at all.
And get this, according to the neuropsychologist Justin Feinstein, who studied her for years, she wasn't just not afraid of the snakes and spiders. She was curious. She actually wanted to touch them and get closer, completely missing all the danger signals that the rest of our brains would be screaming about.
So, you've got to be asking what in the world is going on inside her head, right? For the longest time, the answer seemed almost too simple. It all seemed to point to one tiny almond-shaped bit of the brain.
Okay, so SM has this incredibly rare genetic condition called Urbach-Wifi disease. And when I say rare, I mean super rare. We're talking only about 400 people in the entire world have ever been diagnosed with it. What it does is it causes calcium to build up in places it shouldn't, and this buildup just destroys cells.
And for SM, this disease did something remarkably specific. It went straight for one tiny part of her brain, the amygdala. This little almond-shaped region was just gone, completely hardened and useless. So for decades, scientists thought, aha, case closed. The amygdala is the fear button. You break the button, you break the fear. Seems simple, but oh, it wasn't.
And this is where the story gets really good. Just when everyone thought they had fear all figured out, a new experiment gave them a result that was so bizarre, so unexpected, it completely changed our whole understanding of this emotion.
So, after all the scary movies, the haunted house, the snakes, you have to wonder, is it literally impossible to scare this woman? Well, the answer, it turns out, is yes. But it came from a place no one saw coming.
So researchers tried something completely different. They had SM inhale air that was packed with carbon dioxide. Now, for a lot of people, this creates this primal feeling, like you're suffocating. They figured she'd be calm as always. Instead, what they got was a full-blown, terrifying panic attack.
And listen to how Justin Feinstein puts it. He said it was the single most intense fear she had ever felt in her entire life. So, what gives? How can someone with no fear center suddenly feel the most absolute terror imaginable?
The answer to this puzzle is it's so cool. It turns out the brain doesn't have one fear center. It has at least two totally separate pathways that create the feeling of fear, and it all depends on where the threat is coming from.
Okay, so here's the big idea, the key to the whole thing. Think of it like this. Threats from the outside world, a spider, a burglar, a scary movie, that's the amygdala's job. But threats from the inside, like say your body's screaming, "I'm not getting enough oxygen," that's handled by a totally different, much older part of the brain called the brainstem. SM's amygdala is shot, so the external pathway is broken. But her brainstem, it works just fine.
Let's stick with that external pathway for a second. The best way to think of the amygdala is like the conductor of an orchestra. It sees the threat, and then it directs everyone else. It tells the hypothalamus, which then tells the pituitary gland, which then signals the adrenal glands to flood your system with all those fight or flight hormones. It's this beautiful, coordinated response. But if you don't have the conductor, well, the orchestra never even starts playing.
Okay, so this is all fascinating biology. But it makes you step back and ask a bigger question, right?
Why do we even have this stuff? What's the point of fear anyway?
Well, it turns out that living without fear is unbelievably dangerous because SM doesn't have that little voice in her head screaming, "Danger!" She has a really hard time spotting risky situations. Tragically, she's found herself in terrible situations, held up at knife point and gunpoint more than once because she just doesn't have that internal alarm bell.
And her lack of fear even affects her socially. Look at this number, 0.34 meters. That's just over a foot. That's how close a complete stranger can get to SM before she feels uncomfortable. For you and me, that distance is probably double that. She just doesn't have that built-in alarm that tells us when someone's a little too close for comfort.
And if you're still not convinced how vital fear is, this quote from Feinstein will hit you like a ton of bricks. He says that in animal studies, when you damage the amygdala and put that animal back in the wild, it almost never survives for more than a few days. It just can't navigate threats. Fear, it turns out, is absolutely essential for survival. But this all leads to one last really interesting question for all of us living in the 21st century. HSM, despite all the dangers, has managed to live for over half a century. So, in our modern world where most of us don't have to worry about being eaten by a predator, is this ancient survival circuit, this fear response, is it now doing more harm than good? Could it be the root of all our modern anxiety and chronic stress? That's definitely something to think about.